Hey, what's up YouTube? It's Kotetsu here, and today we're going to be talking about Kimi no Nawa, also known as Your Name. And I'm going to give a quick explanation of like the movie and stuff, just so all the people who haven't seen the movie yet can listen for a little bit and then leave, because the rest of this review is going to be full of like spoilers and like everything that like you would know like after you've seen the film. So pretty much some backstory. This film is directed by famous director Makoto Shinkai, and he was a person who was also behind 5mm per second. He specializes in anime films, and people like his work so much that he's called like the next Hayao Miyazaki. Like, that's how good his films are, and this one especially stood out to me. That's why I want to make a full video talking about it here on the second channel. And the plot is not cliche. It's a very unique film in my opinion. You haven't seen it, so again, if you have not already seen this movie, then leave now. I can't say exactly, but there are ways you can watch this in 720p. I know a lot of people have been led to believe that this movie has only been uploaded in 480p online. No, I found a 720p copy. Unfortunately, I can't link you guys it in the description for like copyright purposes, but if you just search on Google Kimi no Nawa HD full movie, you should be able to find it in 720p. Unfortunately, it does have watermarks, but they're not big enough to really take away from the movie experience. So, okay, if you have not watched the movie, leave now. Okay, have you left yet? Okay, now I'm just gonna assume that you've already left if you haven't seen the movie. So, dang, that was a good movie, wasn't it? So I feel like the first thing I want to discuss are the characters and what I think of it. And I'm gonna discuss like a theory also towards the end about their actual ages, because this is a discussion that someone else on YouTube brought up and I thought it was very interesting. I didn't create the theory, but I thought it was like very like relevant to the film and it made complete sense. So alright, let's start off with like the two main characters. So obviously the two main characters are high school students like around my age, and one of them is named Mitsuha, and she lives in like some backwater town in the middle of nowhere called Itomori. And this is the character that the movie like focuses on first. Like the first I guess maybe like 30 minutes of the movie are like focused on like her like daily life and that kind of stuff and like what she does. And then yeah, and it's pretty clearly expressed like throughout the movie that she doesn't really like her life. She thinks it's boring. She doesn't like living in a small town. She'd rather live in Tokyo. And at the end of like one day, after doing some weird like celebration like ceremony kind of, she says right before she goes to bed, like she's like staring off into the horizon, "I wish I was a boy that lived in Tokyo," because I'm not sure if she was completely serious about this, but I guess she said that because she kind of wishes for a more interesting life and like stuff with more going on. And guess what happens the next day? This is the first time the two characters like switch bodies. When she wakes up the next day, she is in the body of a boy that actually lives in Tokyo called Taki Tachibana. He's just an average like high school student, you know. He like goes to school, like he has a job after school because presumably he doesn't really have a lot of money. You can see that by looking at the surroundings too, like his apartment doesn't really look super nice, but you know, it's okay. But the problem is like she's in another person's body, and presumably she has like no idea what this person does. So like it's very awkward when she lives this first day like in this boy's body, because like she had a hard time like finding out like what school she went to. Of course she wouldn't know where like where this guy's work is, so it was very awkward. And also there's one thing that I caught that I kind of want to bring your attention to. This is something that I don't think is going to be in the English version when it comes out. It's just something that is very important that I want to point out here. Like when she's like in his body like talking to his friends, right? Like she uses like watashi or watashi instead of like ore or boku like normally guys would say, because if you don't know like the Japanese language, there are masculine and then there's like feminine ways to like refer to yourself. And like her friends were like in his body, they're like, huh, like what are you talking about? Because she obviously used the wrong form. Like she just used to talking to a girl because like she's a girl, right? But then she just forgot to like switch over, like forgot that she was like in a male body and she was expected to talk a different way. So I just thought that was like very interesting too. But it's funny too, because like when it got to the part of the movie where she was like at his job and stuff, he actually like tried to help him in a way, because I guess I'm not sure like how many days this was after, but she tried to hook him up with like this like girl at his work, because it's presumably that like most like Japanese men, like the guy was kind of shy. Like the guy obviously wouldn't have, you know, like talked to this girl and stuff. and eventually, like, they got on, like, a date and everything. Like, I just thought that that was, like, kind of interesting. So that's about all I remember for when Mitsuha was in Taki's body, but for when Taki was in Mitsuha's body, like, the first thing I remember is, like, on the first day that Taki was in her body, like, the first thing is, like, holy crap, like, I have tits, and he's, like, just like this, because just imagine if you're, like, someone of, like, the male gender watching this, imagine what it would feel like to just randomly wake up one day and, like, be like that. Like, you naturally just want to touch them, right? Because it'd, like, feel, like, really weird to just, like, have something like that on your body that, like, you've never felt before. And I'm sure it was the same thing with Mitsuha when, like, she woke up and she realized, like, she was in his body. It's like, holy crap, like, I have a dick, right? Like, that's kind of what she was, too. And I just feel like that was a very, like, interesting way of, like, putting that, because it's very, like, realistic, too. Like, I feel like one of the things I was concerned about is they'd play that, like, part of the movie off like it'd be no, like, big deal, but I like how realistically, like, the director decided to handle that situation. Like, it was, like, very realistic, because I feel like if this actually happened to someone in real life, although it was something that was supernatural, if it actually did happen, I feel like they'd be like, huh, what? And it's just, like, a very realistic reaction to, like, suddenly waking up being a different gender. So this part isn't really showed in the movie. I don't believe, I could be wrong, but I don't believe there's a scene where Taki is, like, in Mitsuha's school, like, in her body. I don't believe they show that, but all they know is, like, Mitsuha hears about what Taki did in her body, and apparently he, like, wasn't really used to going to that kind of school, because even though I don't live in Japan and I've never been there, I believe that, like, the schools in a city are, like, quite different than a school, like, in a, like, backwater town in the middle of nowhere again. And she just hears about it and she's like, I did what? And then obviously, like, it's interesting. I kind of want to get onto a different topic now, is, like, how they get to, like, know each other despite them never really meeting together face by face. Because the way they communicate with each other is, in, like, Mitsuha's case, she just writes on Taki's phone, like, messages him, like, this is how you're supposed to live my life. And, like, she has a list of, like, please don't do this with my body, please don't talk to this person this way, because she obviously wants to, like, lay some, like, ground rules, like, when, like, he's in her body, because she doesn't really want him screwing up her life, right? And it's the same thing with, like, Mitsuha. Like, she writes notes to Taki, like, either, like, on her arm, they both do it on their arm, or, like, on paper and, like, diaries, too. Like, they just, like, find, like, this way of communicating with each other, because they have no idea when they're gonna wake up in each other's bodies. It's something that's completely random. It happens, like, maybe, like, once or twice a week. I believe that was said in the film, and, like, it's really unpredictable. And I want to move on to the part now to where it, like, stops happening, and this is where we start to get hinted that maybe the two are living on completely different timelines, and that's where I'm going to tie this all into the age theory towards the end of this video, but I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes. First, I need to talk about the last day that Taki is in Mitsuha's body, and exactly what happens at that point. So the day is pretty much, it's supposed to be a ceremonial day in Itomori. It's supposed to be, I don't know exactly what celebration it could be. It could be something related to New Year's. It could be some Japanese holiday I don't really know anything about, because this film did include a lot of, like, Japanese culture, and that's why I'm worried it's gonna be lost in the English version. Hopefully not. But anyways, getting, like, back into my point, like, Taki and, like, Mitsuha's body, they visit, like, this spiritual site, right, with their grandma. And, like, they do this weird thing, like, where they're supposed to, like, ferment, sake in, like, a cup, where they, like, spit in it and just, like, leave it there. And that's where this film, like, sort of ties in a lot of, like, spiritual elements, too, and I thought it's very interesting, being someone who's, like, relatively unfamiliar with, like, that kind of Japanese culture. Even though I've been watching anime for the past 8 years, and I know a lot about Japanese culture, I don't really know about it, like, based on, like, past religions and stuff like that. I just thought that was a very interesting thing to see. And after that, like, you don't really realize this until the end of the film, but you see the comet above you, and it starts, like, breaking, right? This is the main event, because obviously Itomori is suggested to have been completely destroyed by a comet that was just supposed to, like, harmfully, like, go over the sky, but then one part of it breaks out and completely destroys the town of Itomori and kills everyone in it, right? And, like, this is the last day, presumably, that, like, they get to switch in each other's bodies, because it's where Mitsuha, like, dies, kind of, on this first timeline, because, like, he doesn't exactly get to what happens. He sees, like, what the comet is going down, he's like, huh, okay, and then he, like, slowly realizes it's gonna hit it, and then everything just, like, blacks out, and then Taki just, like, wakes up in his own body, and then we don't really hear from, like, Mitsuha in, like, this part, because on this first timeline, like, Mitsuha is, like, dead, right? So then, like, this is where, like, the film splits onto two different timelines. Mitsuha is on the timeline where she hasn't died yet, and Taki is 3 years in the future, because if you didn't know, Mitsuha's timeline, when she's, like, living in Itomori, and, like, Taki is, like, living in her life at that time, that's in 2013, right? This is a 2016 film, by the way. It came out 1 month ago, so it is pretty, like, a modern time. It's 2013, which is 3 years ago, and then, like, Taki's timeline is, like, here in, like, 2016, so there's, like, a 3-year difference between the timeline. I just have to commend, like, Makoto for, like, making this decision in the movie, because I've seen, like, lots of, like, these, like, body switching animes where they, like, switch bodies and stuff like that, right? But I've never seen one that had, like, the guts to, like, split the movie onto different timelines, because you would think that it'd be a bit too confusing to process, right? But then it starts all making sense at the end of the movie. So, like, obviously, Taki at this point has developed, like, sort of an emotional connection with Mitsuha, and he kind of misses her, right? So, like, he decides to, like, find her, because he doesn't even know the town is called Itomori. All he knows is, like, from what he's seen in his mind. So what Taki ends up doing is, apparently he's good at drawing, so he draws out, like, a layout of Itomori, and he goes around, like, showing it to people. Like, a few of his coworkers wanted to go with him, too, just, like, I don't know, to see what he's doing, because it's kind of a little bit shady just have some random person going out, like, trying to find someone. So I guess they were, like, going with them to make sure you didn't, like, become crazy or anything. So they go around looking for him. Like, he doesn't know exactly where the town is, but he's already made the guesses that sort of, like, on the west coast of Japan, or, like, sort of, like, close to there, and he was right about that. It was on the main island of Honshu, on, like, the west island of, like, Tokyo. No, the west, like, coast of Japan, like, sort of the part, like, facing China and Korea. So he goes around that area just, like, showing people drawings. He desperately wants to find, like, Mitsuha and her town, and he finds no luck. But then eventually he's, like, really discouraged, and he wants to go back when they're with her, and then, like, his coworkers are like, I want to go back, like, this might not be real, like, I'm not sure, maybe this is just all a dream, maybe this is all, like, an alternate reality, maybe it's not real. But then someone, like, they're sitting at a restaurant, right, at some diner, and, like, someone working at the restaurant is like, huh? Like, are you serious? Like, they have this really surprised look on their face, because they recognize this town, Itomori, and they describe what happened to it, and then you just get this, like, look of shock on Taki's face, and him with his coworkers slash friends, like, go to the, like, place where Itomori was, and it's completely destroyed. Like, it was destroyed 3 years ago with the comet. So, and then even, like, looks at news stories, and it's gone. It was, like, a town that was completely destroyed by a comet. Like, most of the people died. Like, everything, all the land sites in the town were completely destroyed, like, covered in rubble and ash. And it was essentially, like, this forgotten town. So, at this point in the movie, though, this is where the writing went from legendary to absolutely extraordinary, to a point where this is something that I've never seen done in anime films before. Like, I really commend Makoto Shinkai on, like, this last part of the movie, which I'm gonna try, like, analyze here. So then, like, Taki, like, gets this idea. He remembers that one day when he was in Mitsuha's body, and they went to, like, that spiritual site. So then he goes and tries to find that, and then he goes into it and finds, like, the sake that they put there, right? And then he, like, goes and drinks it, and then all of a sudden, you're kind of confused about what's going on, because he, like, it kind of looks like an acid trip, but it's not, because it's almost like he's being, like, reborn, like, back in time, if that makes any sense at all. So then, like, after he drinks it, after a long, like, series of, like, illusions and sort of, like, lucid dreaming, he ends up waking up in, like, Mitsuha's body the day before the comet strikes. And obviously, like, that one day, he, like, goes back to that one day where he went with the grandma to the spiritual site, but except this time, he knows of what's gonna happen to everybody in the town. And you know what, I just thought about it for a little bit. I apologize for that last part. That was misinformation. If I forget to cut it out, no, that's not how it works. Like, Taki did not wake up in Mitsuha's body on that one day. what actually ended up happening was, like, they sort of met on the exact same timelines. Like, this is where it was, like, sort of symbolic, too, because the comet was, like, right behind him, and I guess this is where supposedly these two timelines that they're both living on separately suddenly collided, and they were able to talk to each other for a short 3 minutes, and Taki pretty much explains to Mitsuha there, they're both in their respective bodies, like, what's gonna happen to Itomori, and then after this, like, Taki disappears, and then Mitsuha wakes back up in her own body that one day before Itomori, and, like, everyone in it is destroyed, and, like, the town is completely ruined, so, and she's the only one who knows that this is gonna happen to her hometown, too, so she's obviously, like, freaking out, right, and she tries to tell everybody that the only safe place in the town is meeting at the high school, because high school is very secluded from the town, and the high school, like, Taki, like, told Mitsuha this because when he observed the town being destroyed after, the high school was the only part of the town that wasn't destroyed because up on a hill, like, sort of really, like, far away from the rest of the town. So Mitsuha, like, tries telling everybody that they need to go to the high school at night to be safe from the destruction, and they all think they're crazy, right? Imagine if someone walks up to you one day and tells you the world's gonna end and that they have no evidence for it. Like, are you just gonna believe them of that? And even though this is, like, hard to see because the town people just, like, don't know what she knows, and this just makes it hard to watch in a good way, if that makes any sense. Like, it really, like, gets you on your feet. Like, it makes you think, like, how is she gonna convince all the people over town that, like, it's very unsafe to be here at this point in time? So she goes to school, like, and then she tells all her friends about it, and she gets, like, a few of her guy friends, like, to actually believe what she's talking about, and they all try and get everyone on the high school, and because no one listens to them, and I gotta add this point into here too, like, Mitsuha's dad is actually, like, the mayor of the town. I'm not sure if he's exactly the mayor, but he's, like, some, like, executive of the small town, and he tries to ask, like, she tries to ask him if, like, she can use, like, the intercom so she can let everyone know, and, like, send out an evacuation warning just to save everyone's lives, and then her dad doesn't let her. Her dad is kind of stubborn and unreasonable. He's not really meant to be a likable character. He doesn't really have a lot of faith in Mitsuha, so then she has to go to another strategy. She actually goes with her friend into the electrical center, and then they just destroy it, right? And the town is, like, completely out of power, and then she goes to a backup generator, which, like, the sort of town emergency system runs off of, because obviously if there's a power outage, they wouldn't want that to be affected, and this was a very good way of convincing the people of the town that there was something wrong, because, I mean, like, if, like, all of the power, like, shuts off, like, suddenly and unexpectedly, and then you just got an announcement that the whole town's gonna be destroyed, I mean, you're gonna believe it at that point. So, at that point, the people, like, start walking to the high school because, like, they're just gonna trust, like, what they have to say at that point. But what happens that really pisses me off is Mitsuha's dad finds a way to get the power back on, and he like turns all the lights on the town again, and then he tells everyone there's nothing wrong, and then you just, like, can't even imagine what Mitsuha is, like, feeling at this point. Like, she just feels, like, so frustrated, so discouraged, and that all her efforts to save everyone are, like, gone, like, there's nothing that she can do about it now. And then, like, something kind of amazing happens, like, at this point. Like, she gets everyone, like, to go to the high school anyway, and this is where her dream, like, sort of starts to fade away, and, like, it goes, like, 5 years in the future at this point. Like, a lot of, like, what happens, like, sort of, like, in that time where she tries to evacuate everyone is left ambiguous, and it goes to, like, Taki again, and this is 5 years in the future. Like, I'm gonna talk about the age theory again, but it's presumed that they're both 22 years old at this time, and they're both, like, live in Tokyo. No, they're, you know, they're just trying to find jobs and stuff. They've already, like, done of high school and college and that kind of stuff. They're trying to find work, and they both, like, run into each other, but at the same time, like, they have, like, thoughts, like, when they walk past each other on the street, it's like, have I met this person before? Like, I recognize this person. It's just, like, a really faint feeling, because part of the reason the movie is called, like, Kimi no Nawa, or, like, Your Name in the first place, is during these, like, visions that they had, like, when they're teenagers, they never got to remember each other's names, like, after it happened, because they knew each other's names at the time, but just like a dream, it slowly faded away as you, like, moved closer to reality. So, and then they just, so they don't really recognize each other because of that. And one day they're walking past each other on the bridge and they're like, have I seen you before? And then the movie just like goes up to the sky and like it's all done there. Like the rest of it is left ambiguous. And I have to say, like, considering it's a Makoto Shinkai film, like most of his films have a sad ending, and I would consider this ending like a bit neutral, so I feel like it's a tiny bit happier and let's say the ending of like 5 millimeters per second, which I'm not gonna talk about here just in case you guys haven't seen that. So now I just want to get into the age theory because obviously during the film they never specifically said what grade in high school they're in, or like how exactly how old either of the characters were. Like compared to like most anime films and series, like a lot of the information about both of the characters, they decided to like omit from this. Like they just didn't want to include it because they wanted this film to be like really up for interpretation, so that there's a lot of information they left out, which has led me to like sort of get on someone else's theory about this, about the actual ages of Mitsuha and Taki. And the theory is that they're both like alive in each timeline, even when they switch bodies. Like they're both like still present in like both respective timelines individually back in that part of the movie. And it's presumed that, like, on Mitsuha's timeline, they're both 14 years old and, like, first years in high school. And on Taki's timeline, they're both 17 years old and in their, like, third year of high school. So I feel like that's a good theory, like, especially considering it was never, like, discussed. And, like, how we know, like, it's, like, 17 years old on, like, the second timeline and Taki's timeline to begin with, because when Taki in present day 2016 looks at, like, Mitsuha's death record before he went and saved her, went back in time and that kind of stuff, she was listed as being 17 years old, and it was, like, mentioned that they're both the exact same age, like, or, like, around similar, so we just gotta presume that Taki is 17 years old in that timeline, too. And because it's 3 years before, like, Mitsuha would then be 14 years old in her own respective timeline, right? So you just gotta think about that from, like, sort of, like, both, like, perspectives, like, at both times, like, going on at once. And yeah, that theory just makes, like, the most sense to me, to be honest. Alright, so there are multiple instances in this movie where they had, like, inanimate objects being symbolized, and that's something I want to get on because, like, one of the objects I feel was symbolized in this movie was Mitsuha's hairband, because there's this one Japanese word they kept repeating. I don't remember what it is. I'm really bad at remembering Japanese words, but it was like a word that essentially meant like knitting, like it's like something like tying together, and it was like sort of symbolized in Mitsuha's hairband, which Taki like ended up like wearing around his wrist. And, like, Mitsuha had obviously lost that. She's like, oh, I lost my hairband. But it turns out that Taki is actually the one who was owning that. And he, like, just wrapped it around his wrist. And, like, it was, like, the word was threading, right? And it was, like, threading is, like, the essence of time or something like that. And, like, I thought it was very interesting. It really, like, played well with, like, the way this movie was. Because when you look at all this movie's timelines and just try to combine them together, it was essentially, like, a process of threading. So, I just thought that was a good symbol. And obviously, and, like, just like Makoto Shinkai's other movies, they obviously use, like, natural events such as, like, past, like, religions or spiritual beliefs. They also use, like, the sky and, like, also galaxy sort of themes as, like, being sort of symbolized throughout the movie as well. If you go, like, look at all of Makoto Shinkai's cover arts in the movie, they all, like, incorporate the sky into it in some way. So I just thought that was very interesting as well. There's not much I can really talk about without, like, reiterating what other people have previously said about this film. I know this is going to be very long. I think this is the first, like, really long analysis of this movie. I hope you guys, like, watched it until the end if you're interested. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. I'm very interested in, like, hearing what you guys thought about this movie. Again, like, I actually give this anime movie a 10 out of 10 because I haven't seen anything, like, this high quality in the terms of anime movies for a very, very long time. And I just thought, like, the plot and the way the movie is put together was, like, a very good, like, fresh of breath, like, within, like, the anime film genre. And I'm just gonna, like, harp on for a little bit, like, how I think they should bring this movie in the United States. Unfortunately, I do not know if this movie has been licensed in, like, the US, like, Europe, or other, like, Asian countries yet, but whoever licenses this film, I hope, despite they're gonna make an English film of it, it's already been confirmed. Like, I'm not sure if it's like Funimation who's like confirmed this. Like, they could be the persons who are the people who are like licensing this film. But I hope whoever is responsible for licensing this film in the US, I hope they take into consideration like this film's like Japanese like themes and stuff like that. And I hope like it doesn't all get like lost in translation, like a lot of this meaning and stuff. I just hope they find a way to incorporate it in like the English form. Even though I personally enjoy watching Japanese like with subtitles, I know the majority of people who watch anime films, especially like here in the US and like Europe, and I'm sure like Latin America too, we prefer to watch it in English. And like I just hope like it doesn't really, like a lot of this movie's like most important themes don't get lost in here. And I feel like if this is marketed correctly, this could be the next like Spirited Away, like Hayao Miyazaki like big hit. But one thing I'm sort of concerned about too is that people are gonna like turn away from this movie just because it has like the 2D animation instead of like, for example, like Big Hero 6, like the sort of the 3D modeling. And this is something that's kind of been bothering me. What I mean by that is I don't think there's enough people who really appreciate how hard it is to make a full movie just from like 2D animation drawing. That's way harder than using CGI, and that's why I don't like CGI that much, because like the drawing and like the sort of the style you see in most anime, that's the essence of anime. That's what makes it different from like American or like European like sort of animated films that like we do over here. I mean, it's not bad, it's their own style, but I just want the Japanese style to like maintain itself and like continue like to just be like the way it is, and for it not to be like put down just because it looks a little bit different than like the Pixar and like DreamWorks films. So that's something I'm a bit concerned about. I hope Funimation or whoever like markets this film like here in the US and Europe, I hope they make good decisions on like how like to advertise this film and stuff, because the majority of people like here like outside Japan, despite like how incredibly popular this film has been in Japan, I really hope they like try and maintain it the best they can, and like just like get the point across and like keep this movie as good as it was in its Japanese form. And at this point, I feel like I'm kind of repeating myself. So again, if you have anything to say about this movie or have theories to share with me, or like have just like opinions on the movie in general, did you like it? Did you not like it? Like, can you explain why? I would love to hear all of your opinions in the comment section down below. And yeah, that's about all I have for this video. I am now gonna go above ground.